Hello, Jen Schwimmer here. Welcome to today's vlog. Today we have a subject and a theme. The subject is the tragic shooting that I'm sure everybody knows about, the mass shooting at the supermarket in Colorado. But there's also a theme that I have returned to several times in past vlogs, which is the tendency of people acting on their prejudices to reach a conclusion without waiting for the facts. That is the main theme that I've harped on numerous times in the past. In fact, I was just talking the other day, might have only been yesterday, about the riots following George Floyd's death, assuming right away that it's murder, not waiting for a trial, let alone a verdict or any kind of fact finding at all. So now we have another case blaming a tragic incident on white males. I am a white male, obviously, and we seem to be the people who have an open season on us, and we seem to be the subject of this brand new phrase, domestic terrorism. That's what happened on January 6th. Protesters occupied the Capitol briefly. As terrible as it was not domestic terrorism, but that's what they're calling it, even though nobody was armed. But but somehow Antifa, that is not domestic terrorism. These Black Lives Matter riots, those are not domestic terrorism. Only if a white guy does any kind of a violent act or even just borderline violent act, it's suddenly domestic terrorism. So I'm just going to illustrate my point with a series of tweets that I just got off the internet today. Here is the first one. The suspected gunman in the Boulder, Colorado mass shooting is a white guy. 7 reported dead, exclamation point. Q, quote, mental issues, unquote, quote, bad day, unquote, quote, parking dispute, unquote, or anything else other than what he most likely is, a white domestic terrorist. And one more tweet, and this is an interesting one, you'll see why in a moment. Extremely tired of people's lives depending on whether a white man with an AR-15 is having a good day or not. And right below that, it's always an angry white man, always. And it's always a call for gun control. There have been those now, and banning, quote unquote, assault weapons, even though these assault weapons are not really assault weapons. Assault weapons are fully automatic weapons that only the military has. An AR-15 is just a civilian version. It's just cosmetically different from an ordinary rifle. I guess we get hit twice because they associate these AR-15s with white males again, even though women and minorities are buying them, especially in the wake of the defund the police movement that was supposed to help black people but has just made them more susceptible to crime. No police in their neighborhoods. These people living in the neighborhoods, they are not the ones who called for defunding the police and getting the police out of their neighborhoods. I mean, maybe some, but most people do not want to be victims of crimes, and so minorities are now, I might have cited an earlier article, but I certainly read it, that one of the greatest increases in, well, every time we have these incidents or every time liberals call for gun control, people run out and buy guns. I don't know why they don't get this, that whenever they talk about restricting guns, they actually increase gun sales. But this past few weeks or months, since the defund the police movement, the greatest increase has been among women and minorities running out and buying guns, because I guess a lot of us white males, we already have ours. I got mine. I don't have an AR-15, I just got pistols. But same idea, but it's always an angry white man, always. And in one more tweet, call it what it is, white supremacist domestic terrorism. So we get our white supremacism in there and we get our domestic terrorism. Only one problem, though, which you might already know about, because this story will have been in the news for a while, but they've identified the shooter. Breaking: Boulder mass shooting suspect identified as Ahmed Al-Issa, 21, of Arvada. Suspect was shot in firefight with police, taken into custody and transported to the hospital. Here's another tweet. Breaking, these are always breaking, right? The suspect in the Boulder, Colorado mass shooting, where 10 were murdered, has been identified as Ahmed Al-Issa. He was first described as a white male. His social media, which is now deleted, show he was a religious Muslim who posted frequently about Islamophobia, which is going to lead me to a contest that I'm going to be holding. I'm going to tell you about the contest at the end. If I can remember, you know, my aging mind sometimes forgets things, which is one reason why I don't run for president. But I guess it's not an impediment given the president that we have now. Not only was the alleged shooter a Muslim, an Arab, or an American of Arab descent, they don't say whether he was born in the United States or not, but definitely Arab, definitely Muslim. That kind of destroys the narrative, but they jump to the conclusion that it has to be a white male because it's a mass shooting, right? Well, it wasn't, and not only that, white supremacist. This guy, this Ahmed Al-Issa, he didn't like Donald Trump either. I'm sure they were characterizing this guy, these liberals were characterizing this guy, this shooter, as a Trump supporter. Well, here are a couple tweets from his Twitter timeline. Ahmed Al-Issa: he inherited a growing economy, he meaning Donald Trump, he inherited a growing economy and the unemployment rate was low. The economy was on an upward spiral. He won because of racism, again meaning Trump. Well, okay, because of racism, who just went and shot up a bunch of white people? But I won't get off on that right now. Just show you one more tweet from him. Trump's such a dick. That's a precise quote. Don't get mad at me. It's not quite a 4-letter word, so I was just read it as written. But you can see this guy was no fan of Donald Trump. Same as another shooter, Jared Loughner, who was a white male, but he was no Trump supporter. He also didn't like Trump, if I've got my mass shooters right. There was a mass shooter who the same claim was made, white supremacist like Trump, and it wasn't true. But, well, I'm going to get to this. I just want to get back to this woman. She said, well, our life should not depend on the mood or whether a white male is having a bad day, whether a white male with an AR-15 is having a bad day. It was pointed out that the shooter is not a white male. And well, he's a male, but he's not white, and he's not Christian either, by the way. But she was called on that. That was a tweet that you saw, and then somebody sent a reply to her and said, do you want to apologize for what you said, blaming it on a white male? And she said, no, because most of these shootings are by white males, and which her general point still holds. I actually tweeted her back. I sent a reply too, which is rare for me. I rarely even go on Twitter. The only reason I went on this time was because I saw the tweet embedded in an article, and then I wanted to go read if there was any thread with it. And there was. She was called on that, and she said, no, I don't want to apologize because most of these shootings, these mass shootings, are white males, which is debatable too, but I'm going to get it. Well, what I replied to her, I said, let's just say that they're mostly white males, but most shootings, the total number of shootings, are by black males. I cited or I linked to an article that just described just the last weekend in Chicago, where 21 people were shot just in that weekend. twice the number of the people. Well, not that many people died, but more people shot. And then the weekend before that, another article, 30 people shot. But in each of those cases, there were a handful of fatalities. You put those two that I just described together and you've got 10, either 9 or 10, the same as this mass shooting. And that's just a couple of weekends in Chicago. So again, I take umbrage as a white male that we're getting this bad rap, but you can see how she rationalized. This is what I'm talking about, that she jumped to this conclusion. She made this public statement, and I believe she's also a reporter, this woman. I read somewhere that she reports for USA Today, I think, but she has written a book. She says that in her Twitter feed, that she's written a book. She's plugging her book in her Twitter feed. But you see how she had to walk back what she said because she reached a wrong conclusion, and then she had to walk it back. But the real prize goes to this woman, Amy Siskind. Here's what she tweeted immediately after the shooting was reported. The shooter was, well, I'm just reading it the way she wrote it. The shooter was taken into custody. In other words, it was almost certainly a white man again. If he were black or brown, he would be dead. And then it was reported that it was a man named Ahmed Al-Issa, not a white male, but an Arab male, apparently. So she followed it up with another tweet. This is what she tweeted after she realized it was not the white male that she was hating on. Let's mourn the victims, but not glorify the killer with the attention of having his name widely known. If you, well, the phrase that if you believe that, I have a bridge to sell you, the Brooklyn Bridge in New York. Well, if you believe that, if you believe she's being honest, then I have a bridge to sell you in New York, the Brooklyn Bridge, because if it were a white male, if that had panned out, I think she would have been very happy to spread the guy's name, but because it wasn't, now she doesn't want the name to get out there because it's an Arabic name. That's why. Let's just be frank about that. She won't be, but the rest of us can be. So, as I was saying, and I want to be fair about this because I always try to be fair. Full disclosure, I'm a conservative. As I always say, you should consider whatever I say in light of my being a conservative. But I do try to be fair, and in fairness, there have been incidents where somebody was shot or there was some violent demonstration or some violent incident, and a white person, and it could be a conservative, sometimes a conservative, has jumped to the conclusion that it was a black male. But I'm just saying that it's possible, but I have to also say that I've never seen a Twitter tweet or anybody writing down or just coming out and just stating that conclusion publicly. I don't do that. I always, whatever happens, I always wait for the facts before I say something publicly, and if I find myself starting to instinctively jump to a conclusion, I stop myself. I've just kind of trained myself not to do it, and I'm not saying I don't slip. Sometimes I don't want to claim that I'm perfect, but there have been times when somebody has perpetrated a crime or done something and the circumstances would make someone just assume that it's a black person and it turns out to be a white person. So I do want to be fair about that, but I also want to be fair and say that this situation happens most often, much more often on the left. It just seems sometimes that hardly a day goes by, maybe even less than a day, that us white males are not being blamed for something. Domestic terrorism, white supremacism, check your privilege. Hardly a day goes by that I don't read or see one of those phrases. Maybe it's just because I read a lot. You can tell me in the comments if you want to tell me how often you hear it, or maybe I'm just exaggerating. But now we get to the end to the contest that I have. If you're my age, you may remember Marvel Comics had, Marvel Comics is still around. Well, you may remember that the comics were only like 12 cents, 15 cents in those days. And actually, when I was very young, they were only 10 cents. But there was something called a no prize, which was not a physical prize. That was the whole idea. What the prize was for was sometimes in putting out a comic book, well, several comic books every month with all these stories, sometimes there would be a mistake. Just as you'll see sometimes in a film where the character is smoking a cigarette and then they cut away and they cut back and suddenly the cigarette is gone. The continuity person just missed something there. That would happen sometimes in comics, in a Marvel comic in this case, where there would be something in one panel and then you would go to the next panel and that something would be added or something that was there would not be there, or something a character said would be inconsistent with something that happened before, or how did the character not have the strength to do this earlier and then suddenly had the strength to do it later. The writers would invite they would have a letter. They don't have that anymore. They used to have a letter section where the readers, the fans, could write in letters, and some of them would write in an explanation. They would just come up with some kind of rationalization to explain why the latter panel was different from the earlier panel or whatever. And if somebody came up with a good explanation, then the editor would award them a no prize. In other words, they would get a prize, but they wouldn't get a physical prize that Marvel Comics had to spend money on and actually send to somebody. So that's what I'm offering. I hope I didn't bore you with that long story. I find it interesting because, it's my youth. And we old people, we talk about our youth a lot. So, when we were better looking and in better shape and you'll find out if you're young. You'll find out what I'm talking about in a lot sooner than you think, put it that way. But I'm offering a no prize for, if you want to put in the comments, just give me an estimate. It's like counting how many beans in the jar at the state fair. Tell me how many beans are in the jar. Tell me how quickly this story will die compared to if it had been a white male. Had it been a white male, I would expect the story to go on and on and on. But I think this story, our liberal media is going to bury this story in a hurry because it wasn't a white male. So I'm offering a no prize for the person who could more accurately estimate how quickly this story will die. Like, will it die within 48 hours, within a week? You tell me. And also, if it's not too much trouble, give me a thumbs up if you like this video. Share with anybody you think would also like the video. Got any comments? Comment section below the video where you can put questions, suggestions for future topics. You could subscribe. I love getting subscribers. You could visit my music channel and my food channel. Links in the description. As always, I appreciate the time that you spend with me. I hope you'll spend more time with me. I would love to see all of you again. I look forward to seeing all of you again. And until I do see all of you again, bye.